Hello, hello. Welcome back with Katie and Kat. Today we're going to be talking about one of our mindful mindsets, which is femininity. So we use Moonstone to represent femininity in our jewelry designs. We feel like Moonstone represents inner strength and beauty and a connection to feminine energy. It's a symbol of light and hope and also encourages us to embrace new beginnings. A soft reminder of the importance of being rather than doing. It can remind you to tap into the power and receptivity of feminine energy. So this is, again, the little affirmation card that you receive when you purchase one of our Moonstone jewelry pieces. But more importantly, we're here today to talk about how we can kind of incorporate that into our lives every day.
Yes, so thank you so much for getting that started. First, I want to ask you just what is feminine energy?
Oh, that's such a good one. And I feel like feminine energy, it has to do with, there's kind of like the yin and the yang that people talk about, where there's so many different ways I feel like you can describe it, but one of the easiest ways for me to kind of think about it's more you tap into kind of like the energy and the flow of receiving, which again it sometimes has like weird connotations, like especially because I am such a feminist and I'm all about like women empowerment and we can do and be anything and like no whatever limitations, but there is power to be found in being able to like harness that, especially when you think of like kind of like manifestation or bringing into your reality the things that you want. Like if you're not able to receive or feel worthy of kind of like receiving those things, then you're going to always kind of have this subconscious block to the things that you're actually trying to do or be or experience in this life. So I think femininity, it's a lot, it's the slowness, the stillness, the intuition, the creativity, the allowing, it's kind of like a little more, sometimes they call it like you have both in the world that we live in this like mindset place. It's like the woo and the work. Mm-hmm. And I feel like femininity definitely falls more into that woo piece. And I feel like you absolutely need both in life. And there's some great attributes that come from being able to also tap into like that masculine kind of like energy. But for me, like femininity, like the Moonstone, gemstone is one of my favorite pieces to kind of like wear and try to tap into sometimes.
I love that. My father-in-law and I actually have had multiple conversations about femininity and masculinity. Yes. And how you need both. And it has nothing to do with gender. Yes. A lot of times. Mm-hmm. It's really just the energy that you are in that moment. And we need both. But sometimes I feel like femininity can be a little bit more difficult to tap into just because a lot of times you need to feel in a safe space or a safe place, whether that's in your relationship or in, a physical place. But it's interesting that you did bring that up. I like that.
Yeah, I love that you talked to your father-in-law about this because it is a really, really interesting conversation piece to have with people. Again, especially because of kind of like society and masculine, feminine, men, women, like there's so many like pieces that kind of like go into place with that. But like you said, I think it's way less about actual genders. Although I will just put this, I was having this thought as we were kind of like getting ready. I knew we'd be talking about femininity today. And I was like, I think, and this is just my personal, not science, anything opinion, but I do feel like in some ways in society, it's been more acceptable for women to tap into their masculine energy. And sometimes I still feel like men are not as allowed, and I'm like doing air quotes right now if you're listening on the podcast, but it's not as socially acceptable for men to tap into their feminine energy, which I think is so sad and such a miss. And I feel like there's so many beautiful, and do not get me wrong, I know plenty of amazing men in my life. Like I can think of several that I'm like, I feel like this man or gender or whatever, but like they've figured out a way to kind of like tap into that sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it's kind of interesting. Like we fought so hard to be allowed to tap into masculine energy. And I'm like, it's okay for men or, you know, whatever gender to tap into feminine energy. Like that's okay too.
Right. For sure. So what do you think is the most empowering thing about femininity?
I think I really like that allowing piece. I think that's the easiest way to kind of like put it into kind of like as simple terms of possible of just being able to allow and receive without feeling like you have to do or like be or achieve. Like it's just allowing and tapping into that flow state of being like, these are the things that I am allowing and receive. I'm open to receiving kind of like these good things into my life. And again, people, it seems almost like too easy sometimes. So I think people don't tap into that feminine energy as much as they can. But I do think it's just like a really important and powerful part of bringing about kind of like the dreams and the hopes and aspirations that you have for your life.
I love that. So do you think that, I know like with femininity, I at least think of these very traditional traits. Is that a part of femininity? Is that different to you?
I don't know. Like, what do you think? What are some of the traits you're like thinking of that you feel like fall into that femininity role?
Traditionally, I think very nurturing, loving, gentle. Sometimes I think there's a little bit of connotation with making it seem really soft, but soft does not mean weak. I think we can still be bold and loud and be seen with still being able to be gentle and kind and more of that nurturing side, and as a mother or just as a friend in whatever stage you're at, I think that's really powerful. But sometimes it seems it's not weak but weak, and I don't think that that's the case, but that's kind of what femininity sometimes is portrayed as.
And again, I think that has to do with how I really do think like we've really kind of like not done feminine energy justice. And I think I really personally feel like there's been, besides just obviously like the feminine movement in general of like, hey, we'd like to be allowed to vote and to read and wear pants, like, you know, but all of that is kind of like leading up to this point where it's like, okay, now, yes, we've done and gotten kind of like these things in place, which were so like, I'm like, oh my gosh, world, how did you even allow it to get to that point where we needed to bring those back into the picture? But now it's kind of like, people are starting to feel and understand the power of that. And I feel like it's not being viewed as weak, or I would like to believe that people are having that kind of like moment and realization of, oh my gosh, there is so much power in the divine feminine. And like I said, and I don't think it's exclusive to women at all. I think the world and society as a whole would be so much better if we would embrace more of those feminine characteristics and not look at them as, like you say, like less than. And I think that's part of the reason sometimes that pendulum hasn't swung back towards kind of like the masculine side, where again, typically like sometimes those traits are like viewed as like, if you view yourself as a man in that like your actual like biological man versus woman kind of like place, it's because like men feel like they can't, or even a lot of times don't want to tap into those traits because society has painted this picture of like soft, nurturing, whatever is less than the masculine. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. I think that's sometimes for sure the picture that society has painted of it. But I also think we're all sitting over here with our little brush strokes, and I do think we're slowly realizing and repainting that picture. And I think, again, humanity is going to be a better place, I think like 100, 200 years from now. I feel like bringing more of that divine feminine energy into society and viewing it as more, not a less than, but like equal characteristic traits, I think, would serve us all a lot better. But
I agree. No, that's a great answer. So how do you think that we can actually tap into that energy more?
By wearing Moonstone jewelry, we'll tell you.
Yeah.
No, that's one of my favorite things about WonderLight Jewelry is because it is not only like, yes, there is a lot of, studies and evidence and things that talk about like gemstones and just like their natural vibration and frequency
Yeah.
that they bring to people. But more than that, we also like to focus on it from even just like the reminder piece of like when you wake up in the morning and you make that a conscious decision, like what do I want to feel today? What do I want to experience? And if you put on that Moonstone jewelry piece that represents and kind of like embodies that feminine energy, there's something to be said about that. As I'm walking around, I see my reflection in the mirror, I feel it, I touch it, like, and you're like, yes, oh yeah, like this is like my feminine energy, like, just having those kind of like mindful moments where you are remembering. I think it automatically kind of like drops you into whatever you are wanting. And so for feminine energy, that's a great way again to do it, is to just be aware of it. I also think maybe like just appreciating it, and kind of like we talk about gratitude all the time, like the more grateful you are. So I think even just being able to recognize femininity as kind of like a really powerful mindset that you can cultivate, and being aware of that and what that can do and represent in your life. There's a lot, I'm sure, besides, we've got our blogs and podcasts and all of that talk about it, but there's a lot of, just like books and articles and things that talk about kind of like divine feminine energy. So I think just like being aware of it, kind of like setting yourself up for those reminders throughout your day, and then just being kind of like grateful that it exists, that feminine energy and femininity is out there, that you can kind of like tap into your day-to-day life, so to speak.
Yeah. And I bet with that, if you're surrounding yourself with people that have a very similar mindset, that you can kind of feed off of their energy as well.
Yes.
And off of their goals in order to help you kind of get to the point where you can just channel it on your own.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great idea, and really easy actionable step is to, again, just have some friends and other people that maybe have some conversations about this. Find those people that also recognize, the importance and power of kind of like that influence. So yeah, I think that's a great one for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That was a great conversation.
Yes.
I will end us off with our affirmation for femininity. And it's a really simple one that you can just repeat whenever you need. But I honor and express my femininity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. I loved it.
It's a great one.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.